Thank you so much for tuning into a very special episode of Let It Be the podcast. It's been a very long time since I recorded, and I said that I would never do video, but never say never, right?
Never say never.
All right, so I have a special guest. I talk about her all the time on my podcast, all the wisdom, everything that I've got, really. She's really helped me a lot in my spiritual journey, just being a friend, a sister, and everything I need, everything I didn't know that I needed when I moved to Dallas. So we're going to get into a lot today. Jennifer, this is Jennifer Parr. This is my mentor, my big sister, my friend.
Hey, friends.
She, thank you, first of all, for agreeing to be a part of my episode. You always encourage me and push me because I definitely put my podcast down for like a year.
A whole year.
I didn't intend to. It's just kind of life, you know?
Life happens.
Listen, and one thing that I know is that, like spiritual warfare, that is a thing. And it was really like mollywopping me all up and down these streets for months. And I was discouraged. I didn't want to share anymore. And I was just overwhelmed. So thank you for pushing me, not letting me stay in my somber and just getting me out of my comfort zone.
I think that is so important that you said that, because if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking, yeah, that's me, or things you've put down, it's so easy to leave those things down. So the fact that you went through what you went through, which is real, but you said, I'm going to pick this back up. So I'm excited to unpack that, talk about it, and help others who could be in similar seasons.
Thank you. So I kind of introduced her already, but I want you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you be doing, what you like to do. Tell us something fun about yourself.
Okay, so I am what I would say just a very diverse and unique person. Something fun about me is that I am originally from Nigeria, so don't let the accent fool you. I have been in Texas most of my life, but I don't consider myself a Texan. No offense if you are a Texan, but I'm proud of my heritage. I'm proud of being a Nigerian native. My mom is from Sierra Leone, and a lot of that has shaped me finding who I am, and understanding that my heritage, my culture, that's a part of me, but it's also made me very unique and able to stand out. So that's a little bit about me. Fun fact, I'm a geek. I'm a nerd for things that most people that look like me probably are not. So I'm like fascinated with like stars, and not like astrology, but like space and like what's out there, if there's anything out there. I'm just kind of geeky and nerdy in that sense.
I love that. And trust me, I believe that there's things out there. I texted you the other day freaking out because I saw like a UFO. No, I don't know what it was. A satellite. All I know is that I saw it moving in the sky and it was close and then it disappeared and I was freaking out. So I'm into that kind of stuff. You're not
the only one that saw it. So that's how we know, like, it's not just, there's people, we're seeing things.
As above, so below. With so many critters in the ocean, so I believe that it's stuff out there too. Okay, but thank you for sharing those facts. I'm into the same thing, and it's kind of crazy how we got a lot of similarities. And in the beginning, I would have known that. And it's crazy. So what I want to talk about today is a difference between a calling and a career. And the reason why, like, I always knew, like, I wanted to have you on the podcast, but I was like, it has to be intentional, it has to be special. And I just literally said this to you. Like, I met you 10 days after I moved to Dallas, literally 10 days. And what's crazy is when I moved to Texas, I talked about this before in a previous episode, but I was very like, intentional about getting out of my comfort zone, but also I wanted to find people that were like, had the same similar interests. And one day I was literally browsing on Instagram hashtags. I looked up Eventbrite, like, what are they doing in Texas? And I came across this event. I don't know if you remember, called Women's Community. I don't know what it was called. I don't know what the event was called, but I was reading and I was like, I ain't never seen nothing like this before. Like, let me see what this is about. So that I registered for that event, and that's how I met you, just browsing on the internet.
That is so funny because that event, so here's a fun fact about that event. You were the only one that showed up. We did all that marketing.
Well, no, it was the second event.
The second event,
yeah,
okay.
The first one was like a actual speaking engagement that you had.
The second one was, okay, so because I think about that second event, and that's instrumental to that first event. But I was just getting into ministry for women. I feel like I've always been in ministry in my life, but getting into ministry for women. And we had an event that was to help women just find their calling. And so, yes, the room was packed. I do remember you because you came up afterwards. But y'all, after that, we had a whole other event. You know how you have a great event, people come out, you're like, we got to do this again. We did it again. One person showed up. And we'll talk about that because on this path of your calling, it looks different, right? Bree was that one person who showed up, like one person. One person. So that night, the first event, I felt like I got to know you, but it was just so many people. I didn't really get to like know you. That second event was pivotal because you were the only one that was there, regardless of all the marketing that we did for that event.
I believe it was a movie.
It was a movie, yeah.
It was a Hill song.
It was a Hill song.
Okay, I didn't even know what that was. Okay, listen, I didn't even know what it was. I didn't know nothing about it because I don't know how deep I get into it or how I've talked about it, but like I didn't really grow up in the church. So I was like, well, I need to, like, I was first developing a relationship with Christ, like a true relationship outside of religion. And I was like, I just need to be around people who can teach me something, pour into me. Like I always gravitate towards like older, more wiser people all the time. And I remember that I was like, I was just so like fascinated. Like these women like are like, they know so much. And I just was, and it just so happened we have the same like, education background, like PR. That was kind of what we connected on because, and it's crazy just, I guess, calling versus career because for me, I felt like if my career was aligned, then that was what my calling was. Like if my career was if I had this certain type of career, then my calling was that was what God called me to do. And so I was trying to make it work no matter what. And so I remember asking like, what do you do? I was just trying to figure it out in the very, very beginning. And even from that, like no blueprint for me, I took a leap of faith. I used to do radio, but I didn't want to do that when I moved here. So I'm like, I'm going to do PR. And when we talked, you told me that you were in PR. And I'm like, wow, I don't know if you remember this, but like you helped me get my resume together.
I do remember.
You helped me, a stranger, like you helped me prep for my first interview for my first big girl job. And we've been stuck like glue ever since then.
We have.
And I would have never imagined that because I'm an introvert. So like going to an event, talking to strangers, I just could have never imagined that it would stick this long and be so pivotal. So I thank you for that. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that when you are in a season where you're trying to find the difference between your calling and your career, there's no blueprint for it. Like I don't remember being taught this. Like when you finish school or whatever trade you are, you just are told to go out there and find a job. But you're also on this journey to discover, well, is this job for me? Or like all the things, right? So I think that there are some distinctive questions that you should ask yourself. And you probably asked yourself this, or maybe you didn't, you just fell into it. But there's distinctive questions like when you are looking at your calling versus your career, one, yes, they can be the same. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, and most of the times, they're not. Mm-hmm. I mean, we look even in the biblical days, like a lot of the disciples, they had their trade that they did, but then their calling was being a disciple and following Jesus. It doesn't talk too much about what their day job was, but they had to survive somehow, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that there's space for both, where your calling can be one thing, and sometimes your career fuels your calling, or sometimes your career is a part of it, or sometimes it's the same. But it doesn't have to be one. And I think when I met you, you were in a season where you were probably more focused on your career, right? Yeah. You had just moved to a new city and you were like, I need to find a job, right? But through that, isn't it amazing how you're finding or have found your calling through that? And so I think the first question you want to ask yourself in the midst of that discovery is, natural talents versus learned talents.
Oh, that's good.
So when you are searching for a career, you tend to lean on talents that you either learned or you went to school for, or you feel like you have some kind of experience in, right? Mm-hmm. For your calling, that still applies, but God created you uniquely to use that gift for His kingdom. And so you may have to learn how to execute it, but you were born with that gift. If you were to ask someone, tell me something that you see that's positive about me, and you ask 10 people that, you will find some commonality. And that's because a part of that is your DNA. So your calling is something that is uniquely for you, right? Whereas your career is something that I think anyone kind of can do. You may be gifted for that position, But if you were to leave, what's going to happen to that position? They're going to fill it with somebody else.
Yep.
But your calling is for you.
And I think that if you put your calling, your gift, if you put it all in a job, what happens when it's taken away?
There you go.
Because like I've been in Dallas for 7 years. I hate to say this, but I've had so many jobs, and it took up until I would say maybe last year where I was like, okay, God, like I have something, and just even a discovery of my calling. Like I understand now the calling on my life, and if I'm honest, it's nothing I would have ever chose for myself. Like I feel, and this is kind of one of the things that was kind of beating me down a little bit during my time off, because I felt so unqualified to tell somebody about Jesus, especially like when I say like I lived a real life. I lived a life that most people, some are secret, like people didn't know, people who knew me in the past, and then they see me now, and it's like all about Jesus for me, and like my lifestyle's changed, so it's kind of hard to like really walk into that calling. But sometimes, like I would say, like sometimes people can get an understanding of their calling, like okay, like this is what I know I was born to sing, I'm gonna sing. But for me, it started off technically in radio, and that's when I got all those skills and equipped, but it just wasn't working out. And when I was going to take that job at CBS in Houston, and God, I felt that burning in my heart, like God said, if you take this, I'm going to take my hand off because this is not what I have for you.
Wow.
I didn't know that it would still come back full circle, and I would still be able to use my gift, because my gift is my calling. It just doesn't look like I thought it was going to look, And I think that I had to go through those ups and downs in my career to finally surrender my career and say, okay, God, have your way. And then he still gave me he gave it to me the way that he gave me what I wanted, just in a different frame, kind of, if that makes sense.
Yes. And I think if you're listening to this, that is another question that you should ask yourself is, when you are on this journey or this path of either separating or trying to understand your calling versus your career, who is the audience, right? Most of the time, your career is to please a company or to advance a company. Your gifts and talents are being used to help that company thrive, right? Your calling is to help the kingdom advance. It's for God's will. It's to serve others and love God and to help the kingdom. So your gift of communication is still your gift of communication. But I love that you said that in that season, you thought it looked like this. But God was like, yeah, I'll use this, but I want your gift of communication to advance my kingdom.
And you want to know how I found my calling? It was through community. Outside of so I think like you to me are a godsend, literally an angel to me, because I don't come from a family of believers. So me taking a leap, walking out by faith and all of those things, from my family especially my dad, it's kind of like, why you can't keep a job, or what are you doing? But it's like, for me, it's like I have something that's bigger than me that I can't explain to anybody. Nobody's going to understand it like I do, And so
you can't be put in a box.
Literally. And that's how I feel. And that is still like, I don't want to be one thing. And I kind of feel this way, and this will probably be like conversation for a different episode, but like the Christian box, right? Because it's religion. Right. And I think a lot of times it's like, oh, well, Bree's a Christian, put her in this box. But like, I done lived a real life, and I'm relatable to so many other people. So, and because of my experience in my career, it's been a lot of ups and downs, but I'm able to I can talk to people from different industries just because of my exposure. But the way that it came back to fruition was through service. I started volunteering and serving, and that's when it was like, oh, okay, you got a call. I remember I used to teach Bible studies with this organization with an old friend of mine, and I didn't really know him like that. We were having conversations, and one day, I gravitated towards him because he had a organization. It was volunteer based serving, and that's where my heart is, very serving, giving back. But he told me one day, I want to do Bible studies, and I want you to teach it. And I'm like, what? You want me to do what? I don't even know how to do that. But if it wasn't for being in alignment in that way, I would have never stepped out of my comfort zone. I wouldn't have never been like, hey, well, let's do it. But just so happened, I had already had a Bible study lesson written down. I now wrote it down one day. It's just, I had an idea, wrote it down. I had no idea what it was for. But when he asked me that, it was just kind of like being in alignment. So I want to ask you, because that was a start to where like the seed was planted, and then it just kind of came back full circle. But God had to like work some things, because I was trying to let my career fulfill my calling, and it wasn't doing that. But I started serving outside of my career, and that's how I came in. So I want to ask you, like, how did you discover your gift, your call? Like, how did that come to fruition for you?
Yeah. So we talked about how when you came to Dallas, the first thing you were trying to find was community, right? And community is important. So that's, I think, the first thing. The second thing is conversations. And the reason why conversations are so important is because that's what helped me find my calling. I grew up, as a Christian or in a Christian home, but I do believe that you truly don't become a believer until you're probably a little bit older to make the decision for yourself as to what you believe in and why you believe what you are. So through college, I was kind of just discovering my talents, right? And my talents meaning, what am I going to school for? What am I gifted in? And uniquely similar to you, it was communication. I took the same route of trying to find that through my career, right? And while that was somewhat successful, somewhat not successful. I mean, it's kind of up and down. The one thing that was consistent was, as I had conversations with people, they would say similar things about me as far as how I made them feel, how I impacted them, how, because of this, Jennifer, I was able to do this. And you even said it, like, you helped me, you've always encouraged me to be this. And so I found my calling through having conversations with people. I would ask people, or I would just kind of make a mental note when they would say, oh, Jennifer, have you ever thought about this? Just like how your friend said, Bree, have you ever thought about this, or will you lead a Bible study? And so I think when you're on this journey to find your calling, say yes. How nervous were you when your friend asked you to do that Bible study?
I laughed at him.
Like, seriously.
Yes.
I mean, and what would have been an easy answer?
No.
Exactly. And we all say it. We all say no in those moments because of a lot of reasons. Fear, distractions, not feeling like you're worthy enough. And so when you are given the opportunity to use your gifts and serve, or someone asks you to do something, it's because they see something in you. And they could be confirming what God is trying to pull out in you. And your only job is to be obedient. Not necessarily to them. You thought you were saying yes to your friend. You were saying yes to God.
And when I think back now on what we were creating, the lives that it was touching, like, it was a thing. This was before COVID, but like, people would come in all the time, and like, I'm not a real like vulnerable person, but during those times, it wasn't about me, and I knew that. And God, like, every time there was something placed on my heart, I was literally sharing my personal business, crying with people. But I would get messages. I've gotten messages with somebody who had a issue with like a parent, like a relation with their parent, and she came to me like, oh my God, like, that helped me. Like, I started talking to my dad, and I hadn't talked to him in years. Or just people who were suicidal. That was a lot. And so I'm just like, what? Like, this, like, what I said matters.
Right.
And I think that maybe some of it kind of, my fear was kind of like childhood trauma a little bit, like feeling like I didn't have a voice, and it's kind of crazy because what the enemy he'll attack you in the area that God want to use you. Right. And I say this all the time, like, growing up, like, I had a rough childhood, and I felt invisible a lot. I felt like I didn't have anything valuable to say. And I had a gift of communication, but I didn't always use it the right way, And so to come back full circle and to see that, like, me stepping out of my comfort zone and then growing to love it, I loved it. That was like one of the most aligned times in my life when I was like, wow, like, this is new to me, but like, have your way, Lord, like, whatever you want to do.
Exactly.
And the fact that I had already had it, it just was ideas that I had. Just, like, sometimes, well, for me, I would journal some things.
Right.
And just like ideas. And like, now to see how my things are coming back into full fruition, because even now, like, with the podcast, like, my last episode that I recorded a couple months ago with two of my friends, they told me, and it stuck with me, LaStar and Lastar and Summer, they told me, give God something to work with. Like, you can't say that you, like, you want to do this thing, but you have it, but like, God is not going to say, oh God, like you saying, God, I want a house. And God's like, here's your house. No, here goes some wood. Here goes some brick and some cement. Like, get to work, And so saying yes has opened up so many other doors.
There is so much power in saying yes, like saying yes to the right things, right? But at that moment, you probably thought you were saying yes to your friend just to help out. But you see how God used that yes to turn that into him being able to use you to grow in your journey to find your calling. And so that's it. I think that there's so much power in our yes. There's so much power in being obedient to what God has called you to do, but it doesn't look one way, right? It's not linear. Yeah. And so the next thing I would say is centeredness. There's a lot that comes from being centered, because you can say yes to the wrong things. You can say yes to the wrong relationship. You can say yes to the wrong job. You can say yes to the wrong opportunity. And you find yourself in a season when you're like, how did I get here? Yep. Right? There's power in our yes. So you said yes, but then now you find yourself in a dark place where you're probably now saying no to a lot of things. Things that are meant to help you grow, whether it's a toxic relationship, you're just saying yes to the wrong thing. So centeredness is so important on this journey to find your calling. And the first step to being centered is to eliminate, kill distractions. Kill distractions, because you mentioned how distractions will take you somewhere where next thing you know, you find yourself in maybe the hole you felt for the last year when you just were isolated. There's so many tactics about distractions, and I jotted a few down because there's a couple things distractions will do. Distractions taints the truth. It taints the truth. It confuses us about what really matters, and it confuses us to think that what we are looking at is really what matters, and it's not. God doesn't care about titles. Titles are for people. Titles are not for God. God is not impressed by titles. So we can focus and be so focused on getting this title for your job, or my calling requires me to do this, but it's not in front of a stage and I'm not really influencing people. I feel led to do this, but no one's listening. So we're distracted because we think our calling is connected to a title, a job title, a ministry title, a volunteer title, where titles are for people. And they're not for God. And
I'll also say, even with like Instagram, I feel like, if I have 100,000 followers, then that means I'm doing the right thing. And it's just like, I care about the impact over the number that, like, I can have a big old audience, but what am I leaving them with? Fluff, stuff that's not going to stand through hard times. And so it is something, because like a lot of times we'll look for validation, and that was me. And I think that's why I was job hopping so much, because I was like, they're not, like, it don't feel right, or it's not what I thought. Let me find something else. And I kept doing that until I hit a brick wall. And when I hit that brick wall, like 2019 was probably like the hardest year I had. Oh my gosh,
let's just throw that year away.
Like literally, let's throw it away. But that was the hardest year that I had in my adulthood. And I think that's when it was just like everything that I was trying to do within my own strength was like, it's not working out. It's not working out. And then I started getting hit with like trauma and loss and redirection and all those things. And so it was just like, okay, God, everything that I've tried to do, because I thought that, like, in my head, it's like, I'm going to be the person to kind of to go against the grain. I'm going to break generational curses. Like, I'm going to move away. I'm going to start over. I'm going to have this job. I'm going to have this thriving career. I'm going to make the money and do all of these things. And those things are going to validate me. But then, and if I'm truly honest, in 2019, as big as I thought of myself, I did all those things, and it never fulfilled me.
Right.
As big, I wanted to work for a Black-owned firm, a PR firm. I wanted to be involved in it. I was doing all of those things, and I was depressed. It just did not fulfill me. And I'm just like, God, like, what is it? And 2019 is when ministry came about. And like I said, like, communication was a gift that I had. You could have never told me that it was going to be like this.
I think distractions is one of the biggest tactics from the enemy. Because if he can distract you, he will throw you off course. So even if it's a distraction of applying for the wrong jobs or saying yes to the right job, that could have distracted you a year out of like your call or just thriving in your calling. Being distracted by saying yes to the wrong boyfriend, right? And then next thing you're set back and you're like, man, how am I this and I, we haven't advanced. So I think the enemy thrives off of distractions because he knows if he can distract you in the most innocent way. Sometimes it's your family that's your distraction. It will throw you off course from finding what exactly God has for you. Even look at in the Bible how many times the enemy has attempted and even sometimes succeeded with distractions. When Nehemiah was called to build that wall, there was a reason he was called to build that wall. But the enemy threw distractions his way right and left because at the end of the day, that wall was going to save the people. And so he knew if he could throw him off, even his own people tried to stop him from building it. So I think that is so important that in this journey, centeredness it should be your focus. And in order to be centered, you have to eliminate distractions. And distractions do not always look like what you think they are. So for you, it could have been your job, or it could have been going job hopping. For me, it was the wrong relationship.
That's what I was literally going to ask.
It was
so,
like, wrong relationship.
Like, what did that look like in that season for you when you were? Because I definitely have been distracted by my career, and some relationships here and there. But like for you, what did that look like being like distracted and you didn't even realize?
Yeah. Well, men are a hot mess and we are a hot mess too, but who we choose to spend our time and our energy with can become a distraction. And for me, that was it, right? I got into the wrong relationships that I thought were good. And then I found out like, man, how did I get here? And the reason why the relationship is so important is because when you are in a relationship with someone, you allow them access to influence you. Whether that is influencing you positively, influencing you down the aisle, influencing you to start a business. And so that was my distraction because the wrong relationships that I got into just threw me off path to where I found myself seeking God, which I guess God used those wrong relationships to bring me back to him, but it threw me off path. So mine was relationships.
So like, and what I love about God so much is even in the wrong thing, he'll still work it all together. Yes. You might cry a little bit. It might be painful. It might take you some time, but he'll still get you back to where he had you, where he destined you to be initially. So like thinking about in relationships, you know how sometimes you'll be around somebody and it's just like, dang, how did I get to this point? Man. I used to be here and now I'm here. Like that's a distraction and you don't even realize it. And it can start with like, a little, like you said, we talking about saying yes. It can start with a little, sure, I'll have a drink. Sure, I'll do, like, just if you, wherever it is that you're vulnerable, that you're weak at, like the enemy will literally, give them an inch. You're going to take them out because now you started off doing this and then you look down and now you're doing this and then you're far away and like God hasn't moved. You have,
Exactly. Oh, that's so true. I have always said that great women are not born, which yes, we're born, but great women are not born. Great women are made. Like we are made through adversity. We are made through overcoming these distractions, these sidebars. I love that you said that, there are things you look back and you're like, how did I get here? But then you look at, okay, but I'm here. How do I get out of it? And I think that in those moments of tension, in those moments of just bottomness, we are refined. And so great women are not born. We are made. And embrace the journey. I think that's one thing I love that you have done. Just the fact that you have started this podcast and you are vulnerable to help your audience in those seasons, in the trenches, and to show that like, okay, you're in that trench. I was there too. You may still be there, right? I've been in so many trenches. It's easy to see a polished Jennifer. It's easy to see a woman who looks like she has it all together. Like, I'm a hot mess. Yeah. I'm a hot mess. But through that hot mess, God he is refining me and using that to say, one, it's okay. Two, like, remember, I created you like this. Like, I mean, I can't blame my lateness on God, but I just tend to always be late. But then I'm like, well, maybe he made me this way. God's like, I did not make you to be late all the time. So I'm not blaming him, but I'm just saying, okay, how do I embrace who I am, communicate to others, but also operate from a space of grace.
Yeah.
Operate from a space of grace.
And that's what I appreciate about, I had to learn, because one thing is kind of crazy is authentic people are not as common as you think. I met some people where it's like,
Facts.
You are not
who
you paint on the internet, and then sometimes that can rub off on you too. And then it's like, oh, well, I just need to get here. Oh, it needs to be perfect. It has to have this look, or it needs to be like that. And it's just like, that's why I built my platform on authenticity, because who you are is like, you're not going to see me a different, like, this is who I am.
Right.
And so that's why I don't have a problem with like sharing my truth, like being like, because this is who God has, I'm not churchy. I kind of cringe at church culture a little bit. Like, I go to church. I believe in community. I believe that it is important and it's valuable, but I don't want to be put in a Christian box.
Right. Because that box is getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm-hmm, exactly. But like, I'm a believer, and you're going to know exactly like why I believe. I'm going to always talk about Jesus because of what he's done in my life, but I always want to be, vulnerable and be just authentic, because that is how you're going to capture hearts. People think that like, I'm going to have to arrive at this place, or I'm going to have to stop smoking or stop sexing or stop doing all these things, and then God can use me. So can you talk to me about a time when you felt like, okay, I'm distracted? Like, because I want to give it like a little practical, like, I'm distracted. I know I'm not like using the gifts that God has called me. I'm distracted. I'm doing other things, or I'm trying to find something else that'll fulfill me. Can you talk to me about what it looked like in that season of like coming back or being back in alignment?
Yes. And so a season that I remember, and unfortunately this had to do with a relationship, but there was a season where I had messed up. And when I say messed up, I just felt like, okay, God, I said I was going to do this. I haven't been doing this. So thank you for your grace. Right. Mm-hmm. And that's all we can do in those seasons. Continue to thank him for our grace. Mm-hmm. But in that season of like knowing I messed up, I was in a relationship, a relationship that was not healthy. Mm-hmm. And instead of running far away from that relationship, like fleeing, what did I do? I went back. I went back to it. And when I went back into this relationship with this person, I found myself like just enabling him. I found myself just spending all my like energy on trying to curate him and trying to build him up and trying to make him a man of God that I wanted him to be.
There, yes.
And I felt like God was looking at me the whole time like, Jennifer, that's my job. That's not your job. And so in the season that I was pulled the furthest away from God was when I was trying to play God. I was trying to replace God. I was trying to use all my energy to do what only really God can do. And that is change people.
Yep.
I can influence. I can use my gifts to help, inspire, but I can't change anybody. That's God. And so in that season, what brought me out of it was one, understanding that and just getting back to him. Remember we talked about that audience of one.
Yep.
Focusing on pleasing him and not pleasing man.
Yeah.
And somehow I found my way out of that relationship, but just laser focused on God. And in that season was when I found my now husband.
Amen for that.
You see what happens when we listen to him? Like when we try to do it our way, it never works.
That's what Let It Be is all about. Letting go of control, because God will blow your mind. Yeah. He will blow your mind if you like, okay. Because if when I had this thing that I was good and I was thriving, I'm like, I know God called me here. Right. I know that this is a gift, and together we are like doing this great thing. But when I felt that my season was up, I'm not gonna lie, I wrestled with that feeling for a little bit. Like, well, God, like, but it's a good thing. We still doing it. But God was wrestling with my heart, and it was just finally where it was like I got hit with like a big boom at the end of 2019, but I was still like, I didn't want to let go of that relationship. And God was like, hey, trust me, flee. And then COVID came, and then everything changed, and he had to refine my heart anyway. And so it's like, sometimes we'll hinder what God has for us. We can't stop it, but we'll hinder, we'll get ourselves caught up in stuff because we try to like control a thing, or we'll just wait or pray. If I pray a little bit, or And God is like, girl, are you God or am I? You know? Right. And so that, like, I agree, like being in a wrong relationship or trying to like hold on to a thing, if I hadn't let that go, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you doing this, you know? Yeah. So I understand that.
Isolation is like the devil's playground. I mean, COVID, or the year that everything shut down and COVID was rampant, so many people were isolated, and we all made poor decisions because the enemy was having a field day with us being isolated. So that goes back to that operating from a space of grace that I've talked about, that when you're down, don't stay there, because if not, the enemy is having a field day with your mood. Depression sits in, anxiety sits in, all these symptoms and things that are not of God, but are symptoms of things that we are going through. And while some of it, is natural, the enemy takes that and just has a field day with it. So
can you talk to me about a time, because I know you, I know your story, like you have this career, this corporate career, and you're thriving and you're doing all of these great things. It's just like, because you are so different now. Like you're so different now. I feel like you're more centered too, because before, like trying to like juggle like being a super mom, a super wife, a super corporate lady, a super friend, like you're doing all of these things, and it was just like, Jennifer's here, and then she's 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 here. But I can see a difference since you've kind of like surrendered to your call. And I know it doesn't necessarily look like that for everyone, like for everyone, when you like, okay, well, this is my career and it's thriving, but does that mean I can't have a calling too? And that's not necessarily true. I think it's a balance, but can you talk to Okay, so I have a question for you, because we talked about calling and like a career. Now, when I met you, like knowing you, like you have this thriving career, but then you also have like a thriving relationship, and you are a super mom and a super friend, super daughter. So how do you balance those things? Because I do think that like, I don't believe that your calling and your career, they don't have to be the same thing, and I don't think it has to be something that's just so stressful that you're just trying to do it all. I think that God will align you and like how he wants you to use it. But sometimes we'll overexert ourselves trying to do everything at once. And I remember you just kind of being here and you being here and doing all those things. And sometimes it was a little stressful. So
it was a lot.
You are so different. Listen, you are so different now. You're so different now. So can you talk to me about like, what does that look like trying to balance a career and then your calling, which is being a wife and being a mom and all those things? Like, what did that look like? How did you balance that?
Yes. Well, the one thing that we have to come to when you are trying to balance your calling and your career, and that is, what is your capacity? The reason I say that is because you could be thriving in your calling, you could be serving at your church, but let's talk about church burnout. Just because you're using your gifts and you're in a church, do you have your capacity? Do you have the capacity in that season to use your gifts the way God had called you to use it in all areas of your life?
Like, can you give 100 to everything?
And the answer is no.
Okay.
And that's what I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And so in that season that you saw me, I remember that season because you're one of the few people in my life that was challenging me. Like, I'm over here telling y'all to say yes, but he was like, Jennifer, what are you saying no to?
Listen, you got to say no to something.
And she would say that. And it made me think like, oh yeah, like not only can I not do it all, I'm not doing it all well. I'm not sleeping at night. My poor husband, I mean, he was in the best he could, but I wasn't giving him the attention that he deserved. We have 2 kids. They were not getting a nice mommy. And here I am trying to say yes to all these things, where God's like, you have to say no and say yes to the right things. So when it comes to your calling in different seasons, you have to look at your capacity first and foremost. And what do you have the capacity to do? Also, when you look in the Bible, let's say you're searching for what is my calling, and like there's always scripture people want to throw at you, right? There is no scripture in the Bible. There is no blueprint that says this is how you find your calling. As believers, if you are a follower of Christ, our first and foremost calling is to go out in the world, make disciples, right? So we all have that kind of same umbrella calling, but in different seasons, your calling can also kind of change. So
that's good.
When I was single, I had a calling, and that was still my umbrella calling, which is go and make disciples. But how I did that looked different. Mm-hmm. Then I got married. So now my calling is to serve my husband, love my husband, submit respectfully to him. Mm-hmm. Then I became a mom. And then my calling as a mom is to teach, my kids the way, steward our home well. Mm-hmm. And so just like how you and I are not made to be put in a box, mm-hmm. neither is our calling.
Yeah. And it looks different. And I pivot. That's been my word of the year, pivoting, because I think that in one season, that was my calling, and your calling is wherever God has you in that moment. And it doesn't have to be on a platform. It doesn't have to be something where everybody's following you, or it's not going to always be that one way. I think that God gives us seasons, and our calling looks different in different seasons. So true. And that's okay. And I think that sometimes, I'll speak for myself, like trying to hold on to this thing that I had in this season, and God is calling me to a different season. It's like, well, no, I've been doing it this way. And God is like, okay, well, now you have to do. I remember a conversation we had at lunch one day, because I can tell, because one thing that we always try to be is intentional about spending time with each other, because community, I think you always have to have somebody who's pouring into you spiritually, and then you should be pouring into someone else spiritually too. I think it's like the cycle of relationships, literally. Yes. And I remember I was just kind of telling you, do you think, not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm just I don't know if this is healthy, or not wanting to feel pressure to hey, you still got to meet with me or do all these things, because I could tell you needed rest. So,
oh yes.
So how do you navigate those seasons of uncertainty when you're okay, I know that this is my calling, but I'm still trying to do it all. How did that look like? Did you have to say no to some things? What did it look like for you? Maybe stepping away from something that was a calling and embracing a new calling or whatever. What does that look like?
So I feel like we keep coming back to these C words. I keep thinking about these C words as I'm listening to you. But what I just thought about was that I had to be challenged. Mm. You challenged me. You're one of the few people who challenged me and say, Jennifer, you're saying that you're doing all this and you're doing it, but how is that working for you? Yeah. Are you sleeping, sis? Are you healthy? And so I think challenges are healthy. Being open to being challenged by other people is so important. If I was not open to receiving what you challenged me with, I would have still been over here thinking that I am Jack or Jill of all trades and master of none, including my health. Yeah. And so I appreciate you for challenging me. And I think that if you find yourself in this season where you think you are doing well, I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. Are you open for God to use other people to challenge you, to really bring you back to what He is trying to communicate with you? Because honestly, I'm sure God was telling me that, but I wasn't listening. But it took you, a friend, a safe friend, a transparent friend, someone who is just trying to sharpen me as much as I was sharpening you, to really speak life into my life and share that, Jennifer, this ain't it.
And what I appreciate is your humility, because you could have been girl, you can't relate to I'm doing all these different things. But for me, I admire you, looking up to you, and I'm just hey, something's off, so taking that time to rest, because and I'll say this, the podcast, I kind of took a break for a few months. And during that time, I definitely went through probably the worst spiritual warfare, because I have this thing now, but taking this rest that I have, it's okay, God was using this time to redefine some things. And I think for me, it was no, I got to keep going. But God is I need you to, audience of one. That's you're doing this for me. You're not doing this for attention. You're not doing this for an algorithm. You're not doing this for those things. And so if whatever the season was, again, oh, I got this podcast, I didn't think that taking a break, now I'm coming back on video, didn't even really want to do it like this, So it's just but allowing that time to be challenged, to sit some things down and let God redefine you, so that way you could release some things. So you kind of stepped away from corporate and fully embraced your call in this season of your life. How's that been for you?
Man, so that you challenging me being open to being challenged brought me back into alignment with God, because I feel like God was trying to get my attention this whole time, and I just was not listening. And that was the beginning of a journey to where fast forward, I actually ended up leaving that corporate job, that career that I loved so much, that job that I felt like this is it, right? Like this is what I went to school for. Like I've arrived, and God used that. God used you, God used my husband, just different people to really challenge me in a healthy way to bring me back to him. And so I left that job to be a better mom, to be a better wife, to be a better sister in Christ, to be a better human. I mean, I can show you, I was getting I think, you know how your phone tracks how much sleep you get? My average was 4 hours of sleep a night.
That's crazy.
And so God's like, I didn't give you this job to replace me. I didn't give you this job to make an idol out of it. I didn't give you this spouse for you to worship them and not worship me. Like, I gave this to you, but it cannot and should not replace me.
That's good.
And when it did, I had to realize maybe I made an idol out of it. I mean, how many things do we make an idol out of? Wanting to be in a relationship, wanting to get married, wanting to have kids, wanting to do all these things. And those are desires, and they're healthy desires, but we can easily make idols out of it. And so when God really softened my heart to show me that this was an idol that I had made out of my career, I had to let it go.
And one thing that I'm thinking about right now is compromise. Like sometimes it's like, well, I have this thing, like I desire to be a mom, I desire to be a wife and all those things. Like, well, I want to have this and I still want to have my calling, but we'll compromise our calling to have this thing. But what I love and what I admire the most about you is like you surrendering to where God has you, and God still fulfilled those desires of your heart. But he did it in a way that was glorifying to him and not of the flesh, of not of the look of, like I have all of these things, because I know, like, especially like social media, the world of social media, that's where we kind of live. Like you'll see all these people with all these things, but like your impact is, what is your impact?
Right.
You have these things, but you don't have an impact. And at the end of the day, I want God to be pleased with my life, not something that I've manipulated and controlled and tried to do all of these things because it looks cool. But God is, when I have to make an account to God, he's like, completely off of what I had for you, So that's one thing that I really, really admire. Like you are like one of the first healthy relationships that I've seen. And honestly, and for me, because I've taken a different path, sometimes it's like, well, I see everybody else kind of doing what they want and whatever, and I might have to wait a little bit longer, but I know that like it's possible to have the desires of your heart as long as you are just being in alignment with God.
God honors our obedience. I mean, plain and simple. He honors our obedience to him, not to man. And I think he will bless that. I don't know what your season may look like right now. You may be in a season of waiting where you are just frustrated that maybe you said yes to the wrong things, or you're just in a season of wandering. But God does honor our obedience. And if it's his will, we'll get it. I mean, I remember just dating the wrong man, and then to see when I finally found my husband, or like he found me, my preparedness, or he was preparing me through those wrong relationships for that moment, right? And so I feel like I was like, oh, well, thank you, God. I mean, was there not a clearer path that I could have gotten? Did I have to go through all these bad relationships? But I think he just simply at the end honored my obedience, right? And
I think that sometimes we like our own will, our own way. Sometimes we will prolong the journey a little bit because like, well, no, God, it has to be like this, we'll prolong that a little bit. But, the easier your surrender, I'm not saying the easier your journey, because it is, being called is not for the faint at heart.
Can we talk about that?
Please, let's do it.
If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, this just sounds glorious, or it just sounds like we started here, we ended here. Like, God can handle our frustrations and our feelings. I told you that I left the job, but I wasn't happy to leave a job. It's easy to leave a job when you hate your job. It's so much harder to leave a job when you love your job. So much so I think I made an idol out of it. Like, that was hard. But God handled my feelings. It's okay to express. It's okay to be mad. You took a break. And in that year, you said that you were probably at your lowest. Like, our feelings aren't too big for God. Our feelings aren't too big for him. They may push other people away, but that frustration is real. Being called is not like, I don't know why people glorify it.
Yeah,
it's not, there's glory that comes out of it. But it's not a glorified life always.
Listen, and it's not easy. And that's why, that's one of the things that I think about when I'm building whatever this platform is going to look like. I want to share the highs and the lows. It's not always, it doesn't feel good. Like I'm in a season of uncertainty right now. I don't know what's next. I know that I had a little nudge, and something that my pastor even talked about yesterday was being a good steward of what God has given you. Like, have you invested in God? Have you invested in yourself? Like, what are you doing with what He's giving you? And so for me, it's like, okay, well, God, I know I have a gift of communication. Oh, I had this idea for a podcast. Yeah, I took a break from it, and I've been getting kind of beat up a little bit. This year has been really hard, but nonetheless, like, it didn't change what He said. My circumstances might have changed, but my obedience has to be the same. Like, because, and that is kind of what started to keep me afloat and what's got me out of my shell a little bit, because I'm like, I trust you, God. If you allow me to get to this point, you're going to make a way for me. I took a risk and invested in equipment. I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust that you're going to provide for me. And it's not easy. I can't tell you how many times, like, I've cried, like, and when you talk about, like, the gift of communication, that's where the enemy will attack you. Yes. And it'll make you want to be silent. I remember going, like, times when we'll meet up for lunch and I could feel, like, I know you felt my energy, like, something is off with this. Like, something is not right. And I felt like a lunatic, like, but I was still trying to, like, maintain composure, keep it, like, but no, I was not okay. Like, but being honest, like, this is where I am. Being real. Like, it is not easy all the time. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I got all that I need. But when I start thinking a little bit too much about, well, what about this? Or what about, God is like, just what I gave you, just handle that. Yes. And let me be in your tomorrow. You know, that's something that has kind of, like, helped me stay afloat in a season of uncertainty. But what about you? Like, when you felt like, okay, I have it all now, I don't really know, because I know that transition from being like, oh, okay, well, I'm thriving, I'm doing all that God has called me to do, but now it's time to pivot, and it don't feel necessarily stable. You don't really know. What did that look like? Like, how did you navigate through that time?
I had to learn that success is subjective. Mm-hmm. It is subjective. What was perceived as success in my career does not mean a dang. Can I say that? Yeah. It does not mean. It means nothing to what success looks like at home. Mm. And so when I gave up my career, or I just put it aside, right, I had to redefine what success looked like. That way I knew that I'm still succeeding, even if I'm not this. Just like how you said, I may be doing this, but even if I don't have a job, or I don't know how I'm going to make it. I bought this equipment, I'm doing this podcast, but, like, what is all this for, right? Does that mean you're not successful? No, it's just success looks different in different seasons. So when I look at the season I'm in now, you know, is my relationship with my husband good, right? If it's not, we have areas to work on to make that successful. How am I as a mom? Do my kids hate me? They probably do, but
no, they don't. No, they don't.
Maybe I could be a better mom. But what does success look like in this season? Am I supposed to be their friend, or am I supposed to teach them the ways of the world? When I go to bed and I look back at my day, God, did I do your will? Yep. And when I redefine success in that season, then it takes this pressure off, this pressure that, I always put on myself, like, I'm not doing enough, because God's like, well done, my good and faithful servant. Yep. And at the end of the day, that is the only compliment that matters.
That's the only one that matters. And that's what I want I want God to be pleased with that. So it's like, yeah, I might have been, like, taking a leap of faith. Things might be a little in the gray area for me right now, but I know that this is what God has gifted me with, and that's what I'm going to focus on. So I think that as long as you keep that in mind, like, God will take care of the rest.
Yes.
Let go of control. That is what Let It Be is all about. Like, letting go of control.
That's the last C. I just thought of it. So we talked about being in community. That is so important when you're on this journey to find your calling. We talked about centeredness and how you have to eliminate distractions to be, like, laser focused on God's will and being centered. We talked about being open to being challenged and how if you cannot receive challenge from healthy people, then you may miss the mark. But the last C is relinquishing control. Yeah. Relinquishing control. Yeah, that's good.
Like, allowing God to blow your mind. Like, He blowing my mind, because I still, like, this is a full circle moment. I love full circle moments because they show me that I'm where I'm supposed to be, that God didn't waste anything. And that is what encourages me to take another leap if he calls me to. So thank you so much for...
This is good.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see who this podcast is for, who this specific episode is for.
Me too.
Hopefully that's you listening.
It's for me.
It's for me too.
It's for me. So thank you. Is there anything that you want to like leave, any takeaways maybe that we could give to the people?
I've always said that the thing about the grass being greener on the other side is that it is exhausting to climb the fence. I've always said that, like, we're always trying to get over. We're always trying to be this. We're trying to, maybe this is my calling or that person looks good doing it. So maybe that's for me. But like the grass is not green on the other side. And it's also super exhausting climbing the fence. So it's so important to look at where you are. Look around you and what God has given you in this moment, not on the other side of the fence. Mm-hmm. And he will use that. He will use that and make a miracle out of the present. Not what someone else is doing, not what you don't have, but he's using your gifts to refine you for you to find your calling to do his will.
Okay. I got one more thing though. I didn't put this on the list of questions, but you listen to the podcast. One thing that I always talk about is like I have this playlist that uplift me, that encourage me. It's a list of songs that I put together every time I think like, dang, I just need to feel good. I need to speak life into. Can you give me 3 songs that I can add to Let It Be the playlist that's on your playlist that you're listening to, that inspires you, that encourages you, lifts you up?
Yes. Okay. Songs. I'm going to go to my Spotify really quick because there's one I just added to my playlist and it has been on repeat for the past like 3 days. So it is called Where Do I Fit In?
Okay.
And it is by, if I push this, it's probably going to start playing because I can't see all the artists, but it's Where Do I Fit In? It's by Tori Kelly, Chandler Moore, and Justin Bieber.
Okay.
Girl, Bieber was speaking to my soul.
Bieber the believer. I saw
Bieber the believer. So that is an amazing song.
Okay.
There is an artist that I absolutely love, and I can listen to her on repeat. But her name is Charity Gale, and she has a song named Endless Praise.
Okay.
And literally that song is that. I mean, you can put it on, and you will find yourself just like worshiping endlessly.
Okay. And
then the third song, and when you mentioned uplifting, there's a song that no matter what season, whether it's Christmas, New Year's, summertime, is Joyful by Dante Bowie.
Oh, yeah.
I love that song. So it's just uplifting, great vibes. So yeah, those are my 3. Those are on repeat.
I'm going to add them to Let It Be the playlist, which is available. It's in the link in my bio, but I have everything published soon so everybody can see it. But thank you so much. This was such fun. It was good.
This was fun.
It was good to me, and it's an honor to have you as my first guest. Thank you for constantly pushing me out of my comfort zone, and I'm just excited to see what God is going to do. Like, I really appreciate you. And I say this to you all the time. I like to express my gratitude because had you not been pouring into me, I wouldn't be sitting here with a podcast believing that I had something valuable to say. So we definitely like need community and people that can pour into us, speak life into us. And you are that person for me. So I'm just very grateful. I love you. I talk about you all the time on my episodes. So thank you so much, Jennifer. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. This was a gift. This was a joy. And I'm just excited about who is going to be blessed by this episode. And by you using your gift, ma'am.
I'm going to keep using it. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in to Let It Be the podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. Bye.